broadcast. We broadcasting? Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin. This is an open house. We actually have two back-to-back open houses on two large capital projects that the city we've had in the works for a long time. Just for the format, they are informal. You'll notice there's no council or mayor sitting up here. It's meant to just be an open house. A lot of times with open houses, there isn't a presentation. In this case, we have a small presentation at the first, just to kind of go over some of the basics of what's going on, some of the bullet points. And we will have representative from the engineer, Alpha Engineering, that has designed and worked with the city on this water recharge project. And it'll be at 5:30 as it is now. We're going to be talking all about the water recharge project. And then at 6 o'clock, we will start the second open house, which will be all about the Main Street Bridge project. And we will have Jacobs Engineering, which will be here virtually via Zoom. And after a similar thing, after a little bit of a presentation on both of them, we will have a question and answer. So anybody has any questions that we can answer, we will. Again, it's pretty informal. After we've kind of wrapped up any questions, then people are welcome to come up and look at the maps that we have, and we can mill around and just answer any other questions. So if you don't want to ask a question in front of the whole group and just want to ask somebody afterwards, there will be time for that as well. We are recording it, putting it on YouTube for those that weren't able to attend in person. Open houses don't work super well on YouTube, but at least for the presentation and the question and answer, you'll be able to see that, and hopefully that'll translate as well. I just got to say, when I got here to PAROWAN, there were some things that felt like too big, too complicated, too political. They felt impossible. The first one was the pool. Does everybody remember how impossible the pool felt? Rochelle sitting in the back there. She's got a wounded wing. We're glad that she came. The pool felt impossible. We worked through it, and we found an incredible solution. The bridge project, which we're going to talk about after this one, it felt impossible. It just felt like there was not really a path forward. And lastly, what we're about to talk about now is this water diversion recharge project. It's a very difficult thing to get. How many different entities, Jason, do we have working on this? We have, there's the city, there's the PAROWAN Pumpers Association, there's the PAROWAN Reservoir Company, that are all direct impacted shareholders of this. We have grant money I'll talk about coming from all the different sources, but there's a lot of different interested parties. Of course, there's the property owners who will be impacted by the construction, and just so many moving pieces, and these things are really complex to get done. It just says a lot about the worthiness of the project itself, that all of these different entities and all of the different money was able to be aligned to make these things a reality. It gives me hope. Sometimes being in government, you lose your hope. I think a lot of people lose hope with the government in general, but this has been so far an incredible thing to be a part of and to see the success thereof. So getting into it, why are we doing this water project? I don't know how. I'm gonna just hit super highlights. Essentially, we have been put in a groundwater management plan by the state engineer. The reason is because the aquifer is going down. Historically, this isn't a single year or a small band of years, but it has for decades. Well levels have been dropping. So the state stepping in, they started in the Escalante Valley, then they moved to the Cedar Valley, and finally to this, what we call Basin 75, is the PAROWAN Valley. For those that don't understand, there's a little bit of a diagram of what an aquifer or groundwater is. The groundwater and the level that is in the groundwater is a function of of course, water being pumped out, but it's also water that gets recharged both naturally as it sinks into the ground and artificially through recharge projects. Under the current groundwater management plan, the state has stepped in and said they will curtail water rights back to 22,000 acre-feet a year to be depleted or pumped out of the aquifer. As of right now, they estimate that there is about 33,000 acre-feet being depleted from the groundwater aquifer, which is why the well levels continue to drop. So the state's been studying this for a long time. There's been a lot of meetings. I'm not going to get too much into the groundwater management plan, but they basically have just made the groundwater management plan official. It is being challenged in court. We'll see how that plays out, but it is now official, and the main tool that the state has is to curtail water right usage. What they do is they start with the very youngest rights and say, you're not allowed to pump anymore. And then they go to the next youngest rights, and then they go to the next oldest rights. So they go in priority, youngest to oldest, to a point where they figure that they can sustain, or what they call safe yield, that number of approximately 22,000 acre-feet. So translation, over the next 50 years, if this sees its way all the way to fruition, there will be a lot of water rights that are now no longer legally able to be used. That will impact the city, because the city owns a lot of water rights. It will impact any citizens that own water rights in that pump. This valley, the pumping, the percentages are about 75% agriculture, and the city uses about 25%. That's pumped out of the ground water rights. So anybody who owns water rights that are after, in priority in 1951, will be curtailed if this plan sees its way all the way to fruition. And so this is something that has both divided and united all of those that pump water out of the ground, because it is in our best interest to manage this problem. The state will allow for voluntary actions to manage the aquifer. Translation: one of the things we can do that helps the aquifer the best is to recharge artificially as much water as possible. People that may not know or familiar with the valley, or if you're new, in a high water year, the excess water that can't be captured by the diversions that are in place that take surface water out, that water goes out to what is normally 19 out of 20 years, it's a dry lake. We kind of generally refer to it as the Little Salt Lake. It's important to know that our goal with the Little Salt Lake is exactly the opposite of the goal that they have up north with the big Great Salt Lake. Their goal is to save the Great Salt Lake and keep water in it. Our goal is to keep the Little Salt Lake dry. The reason being is because once water reaches the Little Salt Lake, it will never make it into the aquifer. There's hundreds and hundreds of feet of clay, and all that happens is that water evaporates, and we lose it. So the goal and the idea behind this, and the PAROWAN pumpers have taken the lead on this. Jason Bradshaw, Jason, wave your hand. He's the president of the pumpers. They have filed a water right for 20,000 acre-feet, which is all of the water, basically the high water above and beyond the water that is legally entitled to any of the surface water companies. They're able to take that water for one usage, and that's for recharge projects. So that's why we are working together. The main reason we're doing this project is a large recharge project to try to get water into the aquifer rather than out to the Little Salt Lake. So that's just the basic why we're doing it. There are existing water recharge projects that are already there. If you drive out under 400 on 400 North under the freeway, you'll see that there's a pond there that's it's on property owned by the Evanses. That is actually a recharge pond where winter water is put from the reservoir company. There's also a pond that is filled with reservoir company water out on Lyle Barton's place. And these sites have historically been places that there's been recharge. But obviously, in years where there's more water than can go into those ponds, it heads out west. So this is a project that will be added to those. It should be a large project that should be able to take a lot of water. In a winter, in a spring like we had in 21 and 22, there probably would have been additional water that could have gone to other recharge sites, which is why this is the fourth bullet point. There's other recharge sites, even in PAROWAN Creek, that will be determined in other locations so that we can, the goal is to recharge every last drop that is not already needed or there's a right to it for irrigation. The city's also looking at a reuse project. The city has to redesign its wastewater lagoon treatment stations, and we will be looking at some reuse options so that we can hopefully find a one-to-one benefit. And what ultimately, just the basic idea is that rather than put water out in the lagoons for it to evaporate, if we can clean that water and we can find an agricultural purpose for it, we can, through agreement with a farmer partner, instead of them pumping water out of the ground, we can have them use the cleaned water from the sewer plant, and we can get a one-to-one savings in the aquifer. We've just started the infancy of the permitting process to look at that, to see what the state's going to allow. And as we move forward with that, there's 1.5 million gallons a day, not right now, but over the lifetime, as we get towards like 20 years out, will be about 1.5 million gallons a day. Right now, there's about 500 to 800,000 gallons a day from Bryan Head and PAROWAN that simply just goes out to the sewer lagoons and gets evaporated. So that's another project. And finally, agriculture. There's lots of different things that can be done with conservation, with that the state has made a lot of grants for, with modifications to center pivots and crop rotation. These things would all be voluntary, but the farmers are looking at that as well. And finally, the city is looking at different conservation measures, which would all be voluntary, which we would probably going to roll out more incentives for people to conserve, right? If we can do these projects successfully, the goal is that we can stabilize the aquifer without the state bringing in the big hammer and basically taking away water rights. That's the goal. Let's say we're only halfway successful and we're only able to save 5,500 acre-feet a year by putting it into the ground and all of this. Well, that's 5,500 acre-feet a year that doesn't have to be curtailed. So it is a very worthwhile goal that we're doing. Shareholders in this project, some are shareholders, most of these are going to be putting money in as well. State water optimization, the PAROWAN pumpers have now a couple of 3 different grants that they're bringing, 2 grants that they're bringing, more than $2 million into this project. County ARPA grant was a grant that I wrote at the county before I came to the city. Couple $100,000 there. State GOEO is $1 million that the city applied for and received. NRCS, we're hoping that they can kick in some money. PAROWAN Pumpers Association, the PAROWAN Reservoir Company, and city water utility and city ARPA funds will all contribute to this. We're not to where we have final numbers, but it looks like it's going to be north of 3 million, probably 3.5 million, and we're trying to get this thing so that it is 100% grant funded. People say, go get a grant for that. So you can see that there's been so much work up to this point, and we think that we're going to be fully funded. Okay, now on to the project itself. If you're familiar with the existing diversion on 300 South, that's just downstream from the bridge, a couple hundred feet. In fact, on this image, the bridge is right up here. That diversion structure will come out, and a new diversion structure will be installed that is up at the mouth of the canyon. The reason why that is needed is because the location of this primary recharge site that we're going to be installing is not downhill from the existing diversion. So we would have to pump water back up. First of all, it couldn't capture all of the water that we would like to capture, and we would have to pump water across town, and we would have to run this pipe all the way through the middle of town. It would be incredibly expensive, plus maintenance costs. You'd have to pump it. Also, that existing diversion is not sufficient to do what needs to be done, and so that's why we need to move to a new location. That location is, if you just go up to the mouth of the canyon, you can see here, this is the cemetery. This is the very north part of the cemetery, south part of the cemetery. Then there's a little culvert that UDOT installed there. There's a cement square box. On city property just above that is where this new diversion will be built. It is being built so that it will withstand a 100-year flood, and it'll actually pass that flood water over the top of the structure. It is also built in such a way that it will back up water for a number of 100 feet or so, which will actually help to settle the sediment out. And then there's a large gate which will be able to be opened so that it can clean it and allow that water to clean water is good for all the parties involved. For recharge water, you want clean water so it doesn't silt up your gravel pit. And for the reservoir company's water, they want clean water because it goes straight to their sprinklers. Sand in the lines is one of the things that is really hard on lines. There will be 2 pipelines from the new diversion which will convey water. The first pipeline will convey water from the new diversion to the existing sluice box, which will remain in place on 300 South. There's a map, so don't worry about getting it all too much in your head, because we'll actually go over the alignment of the new pipeline. But this project doesn't work if the reservoir company is not made completely whole. So if they are not able to access their entire water right and maintain that. So the new diversion structure will primarily take their water out in priority and convey that down to their existing site, where it then goes over to where it goes from a pipe from that existing sluice box. It goes over to the on 200 South, where the city's generator is, where we have a hydroelectric plant. That's where all of the reservoir water comes together in one place, and then it splits out to the different ditch companies. So that's what the first pipeline will do, and I'll show you the route of that. The second pipeline will actually head due north, and it'll work its way through town, and it'll end up in a large gravel pit that is owned by Iron County. It's a large, like 40-acre pit. It's been out there on 300 East for ever and ever and ever. Right? How long has that gravel pit been there? Forever. The county actually has that gravel pit. I thought it was mostly mined out. And at first we asked them to just give us the gravel pit so that we could put this water there. And they said, oh no, we can go much deeper in this gravel pit. So we have come up with a memorandum of understanding, like an operational agreement that will allow us to put water in that pit at certain times of the year, and then they will continue to pull gravel out of it other than that. We will only use this in the spring when there's high water. In the spring when there's high water, that's when there's water available. The rest of the time of the year, the reservoir company uses almost all the water that comes down in the canyon. So we will really only put water in this pit, like I said, in the spring. And for those that live near there, our goal is to sink that water as fast as possible. If the water is standing in the gravel pit, it means that the gravel pit needs to be cleaned. We need to go in and get the silt out. The county doesn't want to have water standing in it because they want to operate it. We don't want to have water standing in it because if water's standing in it, it's not sinking into the ground, it's just sitting there and then evaporating. Sometimes you see these recharge projects where they've sat for years and years and years and haven't been cleaned, and they just turn into a pond. The goal here is that this does not turn into a pond, and so we have that in our agreement with the county. It's a 3-way agreement with the pumpers, the county, and the city that we can share the use of that pit. So water will go in there. I mean, in a bumper year like 2021, that gravel pit will be full. and we will be sinking every bit that we can in there. And then once that high water is gone, the water will sink, it'll dry up, county will go back in and do its operation. Benefits of this project are not small. Obviously, I described we will reroute water that would have been wasted. We'll reroute it to the aquifer. 2, we hope to prevent the curtailment of water rights in Basin 75. The state calls the groundwater management plan a living plan. Its single sole metric of whether the plan is working and whether or not to actually curtail the water rights, or worst case scenario, things get worse and water levels drop even faster, and they have to modify the plan and bump up the curtailment to essentially an earlier year. It's a living plan, so the proof is in the pudding. If we can get well levels to stabilize, then we can prevent the curtailment of water rights. So that's the whole goal. Like, we're not just fighting a war on paper, we're actually trying to fix the aquifer, and that's how this thing will be judged. So it is up to us to continue to have these projects work. 3, the lowering of the creek bed to allow for the new bridge project. We'll talk about that a lot more at 6:30 for those of you that stick around for that. This was a huge side benefit of this project. In fact, as we were in the early stages of design for this project and realized that by being able to remove the old structure, we would be able to dramatically change our bridge design options. And so, again, we'll go into that. But while we're on number 3, I'll probably put these in bad order. Look at number 5. Fix a known flood issue in the event of a 100-year flood. In the event of a 100-year flood, there will be, according to the calculations, about 4,800 cubic feet per second come out of the canyon. It is the city and the county's goal to convey that water through town safely and out to the Little Salt Lake. Like, we want nasty flood water to go on out. It's not good for recharge, and it's certainly not good in basements or in streets. The existing bridge structure is only able to handle a certain year event, probably somewhere around a 25-year event. And the other issue is that the existing diversion structure that's in place, the level gets rather shallow at that point where it goes over their structure that removes the water for their diversion. By removing that and deepening the channel can handle a much larger flood event and not. If you look, and I'll show this. There's an image that I'll show when we start talking about the bridge at 6:30. If you look at the FEMA maps, the LIDAR that they did, essentially where the bridges are and where this structure is become a choke point in the event of a 100-year flood. That becomes ground zero, where water is diverted from the channel out through town. And it's just the nature of what we have. We've only had that information as they've studied the channel. Bowen Collins did a study for NRCS that now FEMA is adopting as the new flow 100-year flood event. That has only been known for a couple of hundred years. It was in 2009 that they did a FEMA map and looked at the LIDAR, and they could tell that that was where a 100-year flood event would divert. Our goal is to get both of these projects done. Neither of them are for flood purposes, but one of the single largest side benefits is that we will be able to handle a major flood through town much better without flooding the town. As soon as we do both of these projects, we'll actually go back and ask FEMA to do a letter of map revision, which is where they will take a second look at the city, and they will calculate in the fact that we can convey more water through, and we can take much of the city out of the floodplain. That's our goal. So again, totally a side benefit, but that's a massive, massive benefit, right? 4, better operating sluice system for the reservoir company. This is another side benefit. One of the reasons the reservoir company was open to coming to the table is what they have is good. What we're going to build will be much better from a standpoint of cleaning the water before it comes out, from a standpoint of when you're conveying water in a pipe versus in a creek bed. There's more water that you get to the destination because water is always sinking in, and so by moving it upstream, that'll help get them a little bit more water, and it'll be a little cleaner water, and it should be a better system to maintain. So they have been good to work with us because they didn't have to work with us on this. They could have said, nope, we have a right to keep things as they are. So we wanted this to be a true win-win all the way around for all the parties involved, and it really is. And that really gets to 6, the other benefit, just the overall better management of water in the PAROWAN Valley. I always joke kind of, and I'm joking, but it's also true. Rarely will you see the farmers and municipalities agreeing on a lot of anything. But this is a project that truly brings everybody to the table and is a win-win. I think about the residents of the city. If we can protect our water, we can protect the aquifer, we can do flood enhancement, and really just manage our water better. It's good for the citizens. It's good for the farmers. Obviously, curtailment of water rights hurts everybody that pumps. Not all farmers are pumpers, but most are. Some pumpers, and some that's all they do. So if we can help the aquifer, that helps them. The reservoir company, that's a surface water company, if we can improve their system and give them control of it so that they make sure that they are able to get the water they need, it's a win for them as well. So anyways, that's why we're able to secure all these grants, because it is such a good, smart project. So having said all that, we have our engineer here. I want to introduce Glenn with Alpha Engineering. He's sitting over there in the attorney's chair. No pressure. Glenn and Brent with Alpha Engineering have been really good to work with. We do have a big exhibit. I have it here, but we also have it there if you want to get in and look at it. And it basically, it shows the diversion structure, just a kind of how that'll lay out up there at the mouth of the canyon. You see in purple the 2 different pipelines. They go side by side, and then they diverge into the 2 different routes for the 2 different purposes. And one thing that I didn't go into in detail, which I guess I'll go into for just a second, is the timeline. We have to do this water project. If we had our druthers, we'd do it 2 years ago. In fact, we'd do it before 21, 22, and 23 when we had really good water years. The saying, I think, is appropriate. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. That's the way we've looked at this. We've figured that from now on we're gonna get this done as soon as possible and capture every drop we have from now on. But the timeline of this is we are hoping to go out to bid in late February, early March, and that's construction bid. We're pretty much through the engineering. We've been having weekly meetings, every other week, whatever that is, bi-weekly, bi-monthly. And the engineering is almost all done. The permitting is almost done. All of the different interlocal and operating agreements between the entities are almost all done, and we have ourselves a project. We're just wrapping up a little bit of funding that Jason has been going after recently with another water optimization grant and the NRCS grant, and we should have that done soon. And we'll discuss it. If you follow City Council, we'll discuss more how the numbers work and how they flow through the city budget, the stuff that affects the city budget. But it's bigger than the city. I really want to recognize that the city is just one of the shareholders in this project. City couldn't do this alone. The pumpers couldn't do this alone, and the reservoir company couldn't do this alone. It really is a collaboration, and that's about the only way this thing works. So I've talked a lot. Oh, construction, we're hoping to do this summer. It will be impactful negatively on those that live right by the water lines, because we're going to have to install a 36-inch line right down 300 South. There are a lot of utilities in 300 South, including high-pressure gas. Underground, we have sewer lines, we have water lines, we have overhead power. We have the penstock, which is a high-pressure ductile iron that carries the water to the hydroelectric generator. It's a complex project, but we looked at a lot of different routes, and that was the only route that worked. So we will work on a more individual basis with those property owners and give good information as we get down to where we actually know the schedule and we know how it'll impact. Again, we may close a road except for the local traffic only as we're working through these areas. But as we have better timelines, we'll get that out specifically to those that are going to be most personally impacted. Of course, the other people that will be impacted is really when we get down on the 300 East. We're going to go right down the middle of 300 East. Same thing, just 300 East is just packed full of utilities on the left and on the right. The only place to put this 24-inch pipeline is right down the middle of that road. We're going to have to cross Center Street. Oh, I forgot to say that this is UDOT also involved in this project. The county, we're going to go out through the fairgrounds and down through by Valentine Peak Sports Complex. We're working with the Smith family for an easement. I guess this wasn't in the information in my slides, but we will have a point of where we will be sinking water at the city pit that's just north of the Valentine Peak Sports Complex. We'll have a little diversion structure so that we can put water into that pit. And, of course, the final location for the major of the recharge will be in the county pit there. So, having said that, we'll open it up to questions if you want to ask. If it's an engineering type question, we'll let the brains of the operation answer that. If it's a random other question, I'll do my best. We also have the other shareholders here, and they can tell you what they think. So if you got a question, step up to the mic. Or if you just want to ask personally, then when we're done, we'll just talk.
This isn't much of a question. I just want to explain on the Evans Pond. I own the property there, and that's we absolutely use none of the water, and that thing was built for sinking of the water. And a few years ago, the county come in and moved the willows. Willows take up a lot of water and stuff, and that pond sinks pretty fast. It's not a bird refuge or anything. That's for the total and even in the water company pipeline to there. Some use stock water, so we always have water there, and we even divert some of the water out of that into the pond during the winter. And I had one question: who will control where the water goes?
Not the city. The reservoir company will have primary control to get their water right because they're first in priority. After that, it will be the reservoir company and the PAROWAN pumpers that. The PAROWAN pumpers have the water right for recharge. Right. And there will be multiple sites throughout the entire PAROWAN Valley, clear up to exit. What is that exit? For Highway 20, from Summit to Highway 20, they'll be recharging from all the different creeks all around the valley. I think Jason said earlier in a meeting we just had with the PAROWAN pumpers, about 50% of the water that comes into the valley comes out of the PAROWAN Creek. But the PAROWAN pumpers own that, and the goal is to recharge everywhere. Yeah. But closer to the mouth of the canyon, the better. But we do want to recharge everywhere because there's wells. The wells that are closer to some of these are obviously going to be impacted better. But you don't want to just improve one part of the valley. It's the average well levels across the entire valley if need to be benefited for the groundwater management plan to have been a success. Right.
But there is priorities. Center Creek, which was the creek out of the main, that ran right down through the Evans Pond and through there. So I think before you dry that up, you ought to. Oh yeah. There ought to be priorities. But
so coordinate a lot with Jason with the reservoir company. The city's not going to be involved in any of that. The city will continue to be involved very heavily for the main reason being flood control. The city owns this, what we call the breakwater, or the big gravel pit at the mouth of the canyon. The whole point of that is for flood control. And you may have noticed all of the yellow caterpillars up in there working lately. Our goal is to have that empty as possible. That is also a potential point of recharge. The challenge with that is it always fills up with silt. It takes one storm and it deposits a lot of material in there. So we will continue to try to keep that clean for those purposes. But yeah. By the way, while you're up here, Mark, I was at the county commission meeting yesterday, and Commissioner Cousins asked me to give a report on where this project was, and I put in a plug that the county needed to come in and help clean out these. I know that the county engineer had helped dredge your pond once upon a time in Lyle's Pond, so I said, hey, it's time, let's do another dredging of these things so that they sink water, so who knows. But
All right, thanks.
mostly this, if everybody has noticed, there's water that runs through Meeks Pond. It comes out and it runs down through these backyards. It goes through Meeks Pond, and then it heads on out to Evans. That runs all winter long, and all that water goes to Evans Pond, and no water goes out of it. That's because that water is recharging almost all winter long. A lot of people incorrectly assume that the city controls that water channel that goes through there, and we do not. That is a ditch for the reservoir company. The city has a water right just to keep the pond full, and that's the agreement with Jim. Tell me, it's the is it Division of Wildland? Yeah, and that was a DWR, and so they put fish in it. The city does maintenance of it. And the water right was donated to the city that came out of the one canal company. But this is a canal company ditch, and not a city ditch. The city just owns a water right to keep that pond full. But that's where that water all heads. If anybody ever wonders where that goes, it goes out to the Evans Pond for recharge purposes, because they're not growing hay in the winter, and so that's what the farmers have been doing for a long time, trying to recharge this water, right? Okay, another questions? While you're thinking, people that know me know that I talk, so I'm not talking to hear myself talk, I'm just giving information. There was some concerns. We did do geotechnical testing in the county pit. For one, we wanted to know how well the pit would recharge, and all of the testing came back very good, that there is gravel for many feet down, as deep as they drilled. This is a really good site to recharge. Several years ago, the U.S. Geological Survey studied the PAROWAN Valley. I think Tom Marsden was the main principal on that, and he said that basically, due to the shape and how PAROWAN Valley was created, this whole thing is what they call an alluvial fan, which means the closer to the mouth of the canyon you are, it's gravel, because that's where your rocks and your boulders fall out first. The farther out you go, there's more and more layers of sand and silt and clays. And so what they essentially told us is the best place to recharge is at the mouth of the canyon, as close as possible. So you'll notice that the site that we found is a pretty good site. There's already a big hole in the ground, which is what it takes to recharge. The farther out you go, the more what they call overburden, which is on top of the gravel layer. So if you go out, there's a couple of gravel pits out here. I don't know if we have any of the is Pauline here, or why can't what? Steve Applegate. I couldn't think of Stephen's name. Sorry. Of course, they have this gravel pit here that you can see, which is just downstream from this county gravel pit. Of course, that's a private gravel pit that's currently being operated. The farther out to the valley you go, there's a gravel pit that Jeff Hunter has. Jeff Wood, he had to mine, I don't know how many feet down in order to get into the gravel there. The farther out you go, the more you have to get in, and the less the gravel is kind of concentrated. You get more and more layers of different things. The city owns property that's out here by the freeway. We went and dug probably 20 test holes. We didn't find good gravel as deep as the excavator would go in any of them. So anyways, we want to have recharge places, but just to pick a place and try to recharge water there doesn't necessarily mean it's a great place. Not to mention, if you got to move hundreds of thousands of yards of overburden, that's a lot of material and a lot of time and a lot of money just to be able to recharge. So anyways, questions? I'm just rambling at this point. If we don't have any more official questions, maybe we'll let people get up and walk around, look at the map. In 20 minutes, we'll start the next water, or the bridge open house, and we'll go from there. Not one question for our engineer. He drove all the way here from St. George. Any thoughts, just off the top of your head, about this project that you want to share?
No, I think you've covered it pretty well, Dan. It's a well thought out project. The city's been working on it for a long time before we got involved, and that made it very easy for us to do our job and evaluate it. We feel like we've got a good location for the diversion, and feel like this is a great project and a great benefit to the community. So appreciate the opportunity to be involved in it.
Maybe try not to have too much construction during the Iron County Fair.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I don't know if you noticed, but we've been doing a lot. This is going to be a year of construction. We've also gone after a grant to put more pickleball courts in. We're finishing the bike park. We're trying to get money in a grant to redo the airport road and do utility project out there. I mean, if you don't like construction and you don't like projects, I hate to say it, but you're in the wrong town. Actually, I don't hate to say it, because I'm pretty proud of all the work that's been put in. You spend years getting the political will, getting the money, getting the engineering, and then the yellow iron finally starts blowing black smoke, and then it's cool to see it all come together, because these things aren't easy. So, okay, if there's no other questions, we'll let you get up and look at the maps and ask questions.